Janapa Paper Technologies. Hello. About 15 years ago, scientists managed to transfer the well-known sublimation printing technique to digital printing machines using inkjet system. What is this technique? This technique is based on the principle of vaporization of solid phase dye, followed by adherence on synthetic fabric. Materials needed: printing machine, paper suitable for the transfer, dye, and surely fabric. Well, how did they digitalize this technique? By minimizing the dimensions of the dye stuff so that it can pass through the printing heads. What kind of advantages does it bring? Printing quality levels increased high enough to print millions of color alternatives. Printing blocks were removed. It became very practical and quick to take samples. It became possible to carry out low amount of work. When this digitalized technique offered these fine advantages, it was suddenly embraced throughout the world, and lots of people in the sector started to purchase digital machines and wanted to make use of the advantages. Machine producers expanded their facilities and opened departments for the sector. Hearing of the emergence of an awesome new branch of business, digital dye producers rolled up their sleeves. Paper companies looked for alternative solutions for producing paper suitable for this technique. Companies making transfer by using mechanical printing techniques had to stop their machines and buy new ones. People who are total strangers to the sector somehow heard about the job and sold their cars and shops and used their mattress savings in this sector. Technical services were established. Machine sellers, paper sellers, dye sellers, and things got a little mixed up. In other words, we can say there was a little build-up. Of course, the information didn't take shape too soundly either. The technical information flow this method needs got interrupted a little with second-hand, fabricated, shot-in-the-dark techniques. Wrong selections were made. We can say too many alternatives caused confusion. Various machines, many different dyes and papers. 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 Paper became a little like a stepchild. It was so easy to change the paper. Technical staff is going to be needed for the dye. Channels will get cleaned up. New dye will be loaded. New profiles will be made. Colors will change. Will the new dye work correctly? Will it clog the heads? But is the paper like this? Get rid of the old paper. Put the new paper in. Put the cheap one in. Bring whichever one is cheapest. Of course, salespeople also had their finger in this. Supposedly every dye works on every paper. Will it work? Yes, it will. And some people used it, and there are still people using it, thinking they lowered their costs by buying the paper cheap. But is it really like this? Are costs really going down in the transfer print sector when cheap paper is bought? Come, let's see. For example, let's take a pattern like this, and let's first transfer it onto a fabric with an uncoated paper, sold a lot in the market. Let's also do the same with a coated paper produced for this task. When we look at the results, we can see that coated paper gives much better results. Of course, you can say that the result from uncoated paper can also be accepted by the customers. Well, how is this happening? How do papers used to carry pastries or make packages get accepted in this sector? The answer to this is very simple. I believe you'll understand it much better when you watch what I'll show you after this. Certain amount of dye is needed for the fabric to be dyed. The paper's job is to transfer to the fabric with the least loss. In other words, if 8 grams of ink are needed for a pattern to be transferred onto a fabric, a maximum of 8.5 grams, print must be applied on the paper. Shouldn't it be like that? Well, is this the case with regular papers? Let's see. 13 grams of dye is used for a pattern that needs 8 grams of dye in a square meter. Why is this? We can understand better if we look at these crossings. Specially coated papers, by keeping the dye on the surface, ensure that it transfers onto the fabric at the highest level possible. On the other hand, regular paper locked most of the dye inside and did not let it out. In other words, cheap paper, while it says I'm making the user make profit, in reality it is robbing much more from its user. It causes a minimum of 30% of the dye going to waste, and this is happening with the high-quality dyes in the market. This goes up much more with low-quality dyes. What does this mean? When you buy cheap paper, if 2 units are left in your right pocket, 4 units leave your left pocket. In other words, you're really losing money. When it is said you can't achieve difficult colors with uncoated paper, it means the dye transfer capacity of the paper is obvious, and it doesn't transfer as much as you want. This, of course, limits your quality, and your quality can't go up to the needed levels. You decrease the lifespan of valuable parts of your machine with high dye consumption. This, of course, is the financial aspect of this. If we also think of the environment, we shouldn't forget that each gram of dye we don't use and goes to waste creates a big problem for our environment. Also, let's not forget that all these dyes and raw materials are imported from abroad. Of course, the advantages of coated papers are not limited to only these. Since companies producing these types of paper are only doing this, and they closely monitor the needs the technique requires, these papers have the upper edge compared to other papers and matters, like offering product at the same quality all the time, preventing impurities like dust, stains which will create problems on the surface of the paper, production of products purified from chemicals that may create health hazard gases during transfer. With the examples we gave previously, we showed that 13 grams of dye instead of 8.5 grams of dye are consumed with uncoated papers. This means a company using coated paper will use 85 kilograms of dye instead of 130 kilograms of dye. Of course, companies who use coated papers shouldn't forget one more thing. If they're going to make a selection among coated papers, they should make sure this product is within the world's standards. That's all from me for right now. You all take care of yourselves. Don't forget, Janapa Paper Technologies will continue to produce the best for you.